I think with writing, sometimes it is a little bit of like, can happen with dialogue, right? Like something that somebody would say naturally is weird to read. And then you have to think about it being like,
Mm,
do I, if I said this out loud, it makes sense in the way someone says it, but reading it on the page looks funny, right? Like there's certain
right.
words and certain phrases that sound good when you say them, but don't read well. And it's finding that balance, knowing how is the person actually looking at this story? Is it being read aloud? Because if it is, then you can use a little bit more of that. But if it's something that someone's going to read, in their mind, you have to make sure you choose words that work in that way. And sometimes it's not as obvious, right? Or you go to read something aloud and be like, well, that looks better on the page than it flows in your voice. So sometimes you do have to change your phrasing or choose different words in order for it to work, depending on how the person's consuming it.
Right. Well, and so I guess, yeah, there is a parallel, which is the way that the cadence of somebody's voice, where they're putting accents and emphasizing some of the syllables. You may, in your head, hear it a certain way, but because the person is freezing that very moment, like freezing a moment like this, they may not read it the same way. And so all of a
Exactly.
sudden, the way that the cadence of the way that you would read it, they're not. And so that's an interesting, yeah. So that is the parallel. It's that
Yeah.
you're freezing, somebody's talking and they're talking in a weird way, like, and you're just going,
Exactly. And
how
you
do
miss the
I?
intention, right? That's why so many people, when they write like a text message, add like LOL or whatever to the end of it to ensure that the person reading it knows that they're not being rude or they're saying it in this manner. So it's perceived properly, because there is something that when you say it out loud and you hear somebody saying it is different to just reading those words on the page. So being able to translate that as a writer is a skill. And same
Mhm.
with if you're writing something as a script versus like a novel, right? Where a script where someone is going to say it out loud, you can take more liberties with the way you're doing it versus if you know something is only meant to be read by that person, you need to really make sure that the intention is correct so that they don't completely misconstrue the character or the situation because
Mhm.
they read it in a different way than you meant for it to be written. So.
Yeah, that's a really interest. So, okay. So there we go. That
Very similar parallel.
the
Yeah.
visual aspect of freezing something in
Yeah.
a way where your mind would move it. What's the next movement? What's the previous movement? And
Exactly.
you sometimes, like, that's why I also say too, like, depending on the kind of, like, if it's action sequence, sometimes having things where um they're very foreshortened,
Hmm.
frozen moment, you have to be careful. You have to be really, really adept at doing it. It does pay out because it makes it feel like it's more in your face. It's coming towards you a bit more.
Yes.
Like if I'm drawing this, right, and it feels like, versus if you see my hand doing this, right? It's less foreshortened and then even less still here. It's not as
Yes.
exciting, right? And then you come in and it's much more exciting. But also because silhouettes are really important and being able
Yes.
to, like, see something, if you're not doing it well, it's going to look weird and the person's not going to be sure what they're looking at. And so
Yes.
it's a real fine balance. So I always, if you are struggling something where, and also I think if it's a cover where you only have a moment to get somebody's attention, oftentimes having something that's a little bit more of like a noticeable, when I say like a silhouette, I mean, like if you were to fill something in, like if you have a person standing, in some kind of a pose, right? Um, it's a little easier for the eye to process it very quickly versus if, like, if their hands are in front of them, right?
Yeah.
So
Then
that,
you're like, where are their arms? Yeah.
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 So I like Spider-Man's a great example of, sometimes Spider-Man covers or those kinds of, like, where the hero's being very dynamic. It's a little hard to follow it because, like, I'm going, I think this looks cool, but like I can't figure out like where things are in the anatomy because they're so foreshortened
Yeah.
and it looks a little weird to me because you've captured that moment when they're like just about like to come out of the page. And so a really good artist gets it perfectly. And then artists that struggle with that kind of stuff, it'll look weird. You'll be like, I'm not sure what I'm looking at,
Yeah,
right?
something about that feels like I get it, but it feels a little off, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's interesting the things that you don't think about as the reader of something, like someone that's looking at it. You're just like, oh, cool, and you flip through and you continue on and you read it. But when you're creating it, there's so many other things you have to consider to make sure that it is easy for the reader to just absorb it and, move with it as opposed to get stuck on it, whether that be the dialogue or the image. It's actually very easy for people to get stuck. It's very easy to create something that makes somebody be like, wait a second, that feels weird or wrong. And it's really hard to make something that someone just breezes past and doesn't notice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's all different. I would say, I think there's nothing wrong with, trying to push yourself in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to, try a new way of having your characters, like introducing a new character that speaks with a certain kind of twang
Yeah.
like go for it. Like there's nothing wrong with like trying it. Cause if you don't try it, you're never going to get
Yeah.
good at it. Right. You have to try
Absolutely.
these things. So I would say this, you just have to try it, but be aware that it may not be it may not work out as well as you want it to, which is okay. And then the next time you try it, hopefully you'll have gotten better at it because you've learned, oh, you know what? I made it for that person speaking. It was too much.
Yeah.
And everybody's
It
critique
was
was,
taking people out of the story
yeah,
because it was
yeah,
too confusing or too jolting or whatever. And another thing too is always make sure that you read what you're creating in the way it's meant to be read. So if it is meant to be read aloud, read it aloud. Make sure it actually works in your mouth when you say it. Because some things, when you read it in your mind, that's fine, that works. But when you try and actually say it, you're like, ooh, that that really, messed up my tongue. It didn't come out the way it was supposed to. So
mhm.
it's important that you actually go through the effort, as silly as it might feel in the moment, to actually do that, and then you'll
You
catch
act out
things.
your characters. Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll actually catch things that you didn't realize until you did that. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make is skipping those kinds of steps, right? And just be like, yeah, it looks good, sounds good. It's like, but does it really? Is it actually working? Or you just kind of assumed it would because it should, and it
Yeah.
doesn't always.
Yeah. So that's right. Oftentimes if I'm working with, a writer on something, especially once the art is finished. So you now have the dialogue and the word balloons
Mhm.
and the art all together. And so it's a much easier for you to kind of see everything the way it's supposed to be, properly taken in. And
Yes.
that's your opportunity to read it out to each other, to make sure that it still makes sense. And that's where you get also, if you need to tweak, right? If you need to,
Yeah.
um, get like that, go, oh, this character isn't being consistent all throughout. I didn't notice it. They started saying one thing and then by the end of the story, they changed it. And I don't
Yeah.
want them to do that. I want them to be more consistent. So, but you'll notice it more when the art's there so that
Yes.
you can see how the
They're a whole
character,
character now. Yeah.
yeah, emoting and stuff, right? So,
Exactly. Well, and
um,
that's also why so many people struggle and fail with rhyming, right? Because if you're making a picture book, you're like, I really want it to rhyme. And you're looking at it and on paper, it looks good. You're saying it in your head. Then you actually go to say it out loud. And you're like, oh, that cadence is way off. Like I have to force a rhyme, right? It doesn't naturally flow, which is why, most publishers, et cetera, will be like, do not try rhyming because it is so hard to do well. And one of those
yeah,
reasons is that it's that you read it, you're like, this is great. But when you actually go to say it, it doesn't actually fit a proper cadence. And as soon as you take somebody out in that area it's really hard to get them back, right? If now they're struggling to read your rhymes and have it work,
Yeah.
you've lost them.
Yeah, it's a musicality when it comes to rhyme. Like
Absolutely.
it's almost like you have to imagine you're singing it in some ways. If it sings, if it flows, we had to do that with my children's books too. And right,
Yeah.
it
And
wasn't, it's really tough to get it so that it sounds like, it flows very easily.
exactly. And that's why, someone like a Dr. Seuss had so many made up words because you got to fill a beat somewhere. And, you're like, there isn't really a word for this. So I'm just going to stick this random sound in there and it'll just kind of fill in that part of the cadence. Cause it is very hard to do well. And most people don't want to sound silly and read it out loud. So they're just like, yep, looks good. But it doesn't actually work the way you wanted it to. So,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So we actually discovered a new thing, which is that the
yeah.
parallel of visuals
Hmm.
and reading or writing when it comes to like freezing something can look awkward.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Taking a snapshot of a moment in time is hard to do, whether it's through words or visuals.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and so um, I probably it's one of the reasons why like I do try to push like some of my uh the way that I draw like characters in space and make them
Mhm.
um somewhat foreshortened and stuff. But I'm not, there's some people that are so good at really doing that kind of stuff. And even, and then you add an element of like a fisheye lens where
Yeah.
things
Oh,
really
yeah.
work, where you have like, again, this is a perfect example of like, there's no way that my hand is actually, I have a big head, but my hand is now like, like I can basically go like this and my
Uh-huh.
hand is technically bigger than from my beard on up, right? That's not possible. But if you make something foreshortened and then on top of it, it has like the lens, the camera lens kind of warps things.
Yeah.
It creates for, we've gotten used to it because of the fact that we all now have phones that can do that, right?
Yes.
So and we see it in movies now too. Like there's all, the eye has gotten used to it, but there was a time.
Doesn't feel as off-putting as it once did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There was a time when, because if I think about like comic books from like the 60s, 70s, I don't remember seeing a lot of that kind of warped
Mhm.
fisheye type of effect. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there were some artists that did it, but it wasn't super common. They foreshortened, yes, but they didn't do that kind of warped because it wasn't something that was common. And it's also, if you want to do it correctly, it's very complicated, uh,
Yeah.
technically. So you almost have to, a lot of times artists, I think they just fudge it. But because we see it so often now, we've gotten better at figuring it out because there's reference out there for it, right?
Which I think is like that huge thing we've talked so much about is reference, right? And when there isn't a lot of that out there, and you're like, how would I make that work that it makes sense? Whereas now it's like that is so much around us, right? And you can find it so much easier. You can recreate it so much easier. People are more used to looking at things that way, which wasn't the case, right? Like it wasn't something that people saw regularly, and now it's just a given. That's what cameras do nowadays. So
Yeah. It would be interesting. It is for sure. There were artists that stood out because they were the few that were doing it and doing it
mhm.
well. And now it's much more common to see it. And unfortunately, it's because it's taken, um, some of that kind of uh, all of the ways that we can like, see things
Mhm.
there. It's a lot of it's been seen now to the point where it's not as like innovative as it had been at
Yeah.
one point. And therefore, an artist or a reader just, they in some ways can even do it themselves. Unfortunately, with stuff like AI, right? Like you can
Yeah. Well,
create.
and so many things that were, like you said, like revolutionary, so cool, just kind of get skimmed past now. It's like, do, like, you don't really stop and be like, wow, that is neat because we're so inundated with material all the time and all of these techniques out there. Um, that when you do see somebody do something that is kind of like different than what is in right now, it really strikes you as being like, oh, wow, like that. I haven't seen a ton of that because some of those things now have just become, like you said, like everybody everywhere is doing it one way or the other. So,
Is there anything like that in writing, like any kind of very innovative ways that you're seeing authors tell stories, or do you feel like it's kind of just all been done for the
you
most
know
part?
what? It's interesting. And I feel like there's always, every once in a while, there's something somebody does that you're like, that is cool. Like, I haven't seen that lately or as much of that. Um, and then once it becomes something that somebody notes as being neat and innovative, it now becomes a thing everybody tries to do and it loses a bit of its cachet, kind of like we just talked about. But I do think that there is still storytelling things that are people are finding different ways to do, which I think is really interesting, is that with the mediums available to you now and the way you can put stuff out there, I do think that people are updating exactly how you tell a story isn't the same as it was before. Um, Back to like your comment about AI, it's ruined a lot of technique. A lot of cool
Right,
things people used to do now is turned into that's just AI slop, right? And it's like writers were doing that well before it got co-opted, but now you have to think about how you're doing things because some of the techniques that you've always used you can't use anymore because they've now been turned into, well, that's just how AI writes. It's like, well, no, it learned from good writers.
right,
And then and so now you're like, well, I can't do some of the stylistic things that I loved because, it's turned into that must be AI. It's like I love an Oxford comma. You have to take that out of my cold dead hands, and that's now become one of those signals of AI. And I'm like, no, you need it, and I use it everywhere, and I'm not going to not use it. But it becomes one of those things now where everyone's like, oh, if you use that, that means like, no, you just know how to write properly.
right.
So it has definitely forced writers, true writers, to really rethink some of the technique and some of the stylistic things they do. And I do think we're going to see some really interesting things coming out of it because you do have to try something different now to stand out.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that same with like in the comic book world, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm not there that when it we've really kind of caught up when it comes to how you can use computers to create really cool like
Hmm.
painterly type things,
Yeah.
and like that would have been a much less common thing because of how like you're traditionally painting it all, and then that takes time
Yeah.
to
So
medium
labor
to
intensive.
dry,
Yeah.
right? And now you can do it so much faster because it's all digital, right? And of
The
course
tools
there's
have changed things. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, there's I think I mean, I think the world of comic books, there's always going to be like some innovation when it comes to the type of medium that it's going to platform on, like whether it's like if
Mm-hmm.
everybody started getting like phones that can actually like have 3D elements to it,
Yeah.
like where you can actually project a hologram or
Yeah, like
something.
kind of like the augmented reality type stuff where I mean, that's always neat to see how people are moving forward with that, where it's like now the thing's actually in your space, right? Like it's in the room with you as opposed to just on the screen. But yeah, I think all of that the technology keeps changing how we tell stories. Truly, it's
Yeah.
changing storytelling in so many ways, and it's going to keep happening. We're not going backwards. It's keeping up with the changes and the trends, and figuring out where you fit into them is important. Because I think part of it is if we ignore it and are just like, well, I don't like this where it's going, and I'm just going to pretend it's not happening. Unfortunately, you can only hang on that for so long, right? It's like, how can I fit into where it's going, and have a lane that I can own or a unique style within this new world is probably the better way to do it. I've seen many industries, like within like the film and television space, completely dissolve overnight because of a technology that came in, right? Like people that had this amazing craft of doing these things suddenly became irrelevant because there was an app or a computer program that now could do it, fast and easy and cheap. and their skill, their trade was no longer relevant to the industry. And so it's like, how do you remain, you know, at the foreground of it and keep doing what you're doing, but be aware and cognizant of the new things that are coming up in the future.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I've heard is not necessarily that I wouldn't say it's innovative in the sense of like something that is never been done. It's more the way that content is received. So
Mm-hmm.
people's attention is much shorter.
Yeah.
So, like, and also the way that because everything is viewed through a vertical screen, right?
Uh-huh.
As opposed to more horizontal, you
Yep.
have, um, like the way that uh, movies are going to be filmed or TV shows may be filmed like more vertically, as
Yep.
well as in shorter, much instead of like a 20-minute, it's like a 2-minute long,
Uh-huh.
like
Yep.
like a TikTok kind of thing. And
Yep.
also this, I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but filmmakers are um, blocking everything in the center because everything on the other
It's
side
going
of
to
it
be
is going to
cut.
get stripped out anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you think about like, with TV where everything used to be very square, right? And then suddenly it was like now we have widescreen TVs and so everything went this way and went big and wide and, vast and now it's like and we're going back in again. So it's just like it's interesting to see as how people consume the content starts to impact how it's made, how it's shown. It's shorter bursts, you're right. People's attention span is like you're lucky to get like 2 minutes out of people now. And, do you cut it into a bunch of little things and let them just sort of catch up? It's changing really fast. And part of it is we're forcing the changes, right? Like we also have to, as much as we might want to make things in a certain way, if that's not how people want to consume them anymore, we have to figure out how to make what we make in the way people actually want to engage with it. So,
Yeah, sometimes it's not necessarily done with to make something better.
nope.
It's being done because that's what the audience wants now.
100%. Yeah.
So, like I prefer books that you can hold,
Yep.
but I mean, I get it. People don't read books like that anymore. They read it, as I said, everything's on a
Everything.
screen,
Yeah.
right? So I think that personally, I think that there is a benefit to reading that, having something tactile like that. But,
Mhm.
uh, that's what people want, right?